This psychedelic renaissance alarm really pulled me out of a long nightmare. There was this scary man named Nixon who kept chasing me around and calling me mean names like drug. Anyways, I should probably get back to applying for jobs on the mystical marketplace. Wow, it's been a while since I've looked at my resume. Let's see, the last edits I made were back in 1976 at Spring Grove Hospital. All right, so since then, I've held a few jobs: Swiss Medical Society, University Hospital Zurich, Imperial College London, University Hospital Basel. Oh, right, the psilocybin project. Well, if I change my name, I don't think anyone would check. And oh, the biological warfare lab. I don't think God's going to want to hear about that. I did go to the doctor and they did find some of my abilities, so I can add that. And I have done a lot of volunteering at art since being unemployed. Let's see, my letters in rec. We've got Timothy Leary. I do love that quote. And Albert Hoffman. Oh, such an angel. All right, this looks good, but maybe it needs a little bit of pizzazz to really showcase who I am. Perfect. Now this really represents LSD. Okay, now I'm shooting for the stars here. So let me apply to the major American religions of the 1960s: Judaism, Christianity, Hinduism, and Buddhism. All right, here goes nothing. Ah, no way. I've received interviews with all the religions. Okay. Let's start with God. Hello, God. I'm reaching out with regards to being employed as an adjunct to the Jewish mystical and spiritual practices. See, I may be young, but I've demonstrated my ability to reliably produce experiences that have both clinical and theological importance. Through my role in the counterculture and the broader Jewish renewal movement, I suggest I could be of great use to the many contemporary practitioners of Judaism who need a little pep in their step when it comes to spirituality, those pioneering a certain kind of neo Hasidism or pharmaco Hasidism, if you will.
Hello, Lucy. You certainly make a bold case for why you'd fit well with our sacred traditions. Why don't you tell me a bit about why you think this is? What about Jewish mysticism fits so well with your background?
Certainly. My main selling point is my ability to produce what some have termed mystical experiences. These experiences, which have been characterized by feelings such as unity, transcendence, bliss, among others, have some pretty close ties to Jewish mystical traditions such as the Kabbalah. I share the conception in the foundational Kabbalistic literature, the Zerah, that our reality is a false construction, an Alma Dikshira. Some notable Jewish historical figures have even compared me directly to Jewish mystical concepts, such as Ein Sof, which is like the eternal, infinite, unchanging nature of God, and Sephirah, the varied multiplicity of forms through which the divine manifests. These direct experiences of divine presence, or devuket, can encourage practitioners of Judaism to connect with you and inspire them to perfect their service to you through devoted practices.
Lucy, while there are certainly more radical camps within Judaism, you must also consider the more conservative Orthodox members who scoff at such proposals. To them, you are more appropriately considered an escape from the real world, the Olam Haseya. In our tradition, a deep grounding in the suffering of reality, our divine's very creation, which you deem so fickle, is expected of followers, while abandonment of it is sinful.
I mean, is that much of a transgression in your tradition to use me?
In fact, our Orthodox laws spelled out in the Torah, the Halakha, expressly forbid such practices. In this view, there are certain governing interpersonal dynamics. Among these include concepts such as Hachavel Beatzmo, Hachavel Bechavero, and Kamera Sekanta Meisura, respectively referring to injuries towards self, others, and the collective. Indulging in your idea of spirituality and mysticism could rightly be construed as an offense against the Jewish collective, a hezekiah derabim, given your organic risks. Compromising the health and welfare of our members goes against a commandment in the Torah guarding against this, "Vinishmartem meod lenoshtaikim," and makes you liable in my judgment.
But you're presupposing that ingesting me is harmful by default, when that's not necessarily true. In fact, I've even been used specifically to treat PTSD in survivors of the Holocaust. Think of how beneficial this could be for the trauma inherited by countless contemporary members of the Jewish community.
You're applying as a spiritual technology of sorts, not a clinical tool. At any rate, your kind of mysticism is a cheap, abstracted replication of ours that should be attained through tefillah, or prayer, hirur teshuva, or contemplating repentance, and chespon hanafesh, or self-reflection. We don't need any shortcuts, and therefore cannot employ you in our religion.
Wait, if you can't offer me employment, can you at least refer me to your son?
Shalom.
Well, that didn't go as planned. I thought for sure that the intergenerational trauma thing would have at least lent me some credibility, much less how much I got schooled up on Neo Hasidism and the Kabbalah. Maybe in my email to Jesus, I should hold back on my clinical work with Bill Wilson. Hello, Jesus. I'm reaching out with regards to the possibility of employment in your religious tradition and spiritual practices. My name is Lucy, and I believe I'd be an excellent fit for this position. My earliest proponents, like Aldous Huxley, used explicitly Christian terms to compare me to the beatific vision, the rapturous experience of appearing before God. Indeed, one could describe the kinds of experiences I produce as so called purgation of the soul into its purest, most essential form. Some may even call God-like. Such a direct way of fusing with your Father is what plenty of Christians desperately want but fail to obtain using the old stale bread and bitter wine of communion. I think I could be the new and improved body and blood of Christ. When you think about it, it's like we're a match made in heaven, literally.
Lucy, it's a bit presumptuous to say that people literally become my father when they use you. Even so, why would I want that? It would completely obviate the need for anyone to come to my house on Sundays if you offer a false sense of connection with me. Also, didn't this big proponent of yours equally reference your satanic potential in his essay titled Heaven and Hell? My dad would probably have me killed again if I knowingly introduced our followers to you with that potential in mind.
But I'm not trying to keep people from coming to your house every weekend. Imagine how much fun it would be if we all got together and celebrated on Sundays. In fact, you'll find some of my earliest jobs I've held actually take place in a church. See, in 1962, my ability to help Christians attain a direct connection to God on Good Friday was put to the test with some promising results. I'm sure if you asked them all these years later, they'd probably still say that it was one of the most spiritually meaningful experiences of their lives.
Yeah, speaking of which, I'm pretty sure some guy actually did get in touch with them a few years after the experiment took place. I think you're failing to mention a few parts, like the participant who had to be tranquilized after he left the church and ran down the streets claiming that he was the Messiah, warning everyone of my second coming. Care to comment on that?
Yeah, that guy. Okay, I admit I can be pretty powerful, and with everything going on in that setting, it makes sense that some people might have gotten overwhelmed with the sermon and the music and the Christian connotations and whatnot. But the important thing is that they were prepared professionals on hand to manage the adverse experience. Easy fix.
Yeah, Lucy, I don't see this union between us panning out. Regarding this Good Friday experiment and your whole notion of set and setting, the positive results were blatantly primed with divinity students during a church sermon on Good Friday. Additionally, the largely Christian vocabulary used to describe you isn't necessarily an indication that you're a good fit. I saw this more as a matter of unchecked perennialist bias and historical circumstance that is now simply taken for granted. Had the native populations that have used your relatives since before I walked the earth had the final say in how to describe your kind of experience, I'm sure we'd see a lot more of their words being used.
I think you're misunderstanding. I'm not trying to conflate Christian mystical experiences with my mystical experiences willy nilly. There's been plenty of commentary from well known scholars who have really thought out our relationship. Think of how much potential there is in reliable, controlled production of mystical experiences like me.
I'd be more convinced if I hadn't noticed another discrepancy in the Good Friday experiment. I'm seeing that this wasn't you who was employed in the study, but instead it was psilocybin. Can you account for this?
Uh, well, I thought maybe since there's so much talk of magic mushrooms in early Christianity, then it might lend me some credibility. I mean, cut me some slack. We're practically analogs. It isn't that far of a jump to think that I could have served the same function for your followers.
Even if you hadn't plagiarized these results as your own qualifications, we don't want our followers becoming dependent on you for their path to attaining salvation. Additionally, we're not convinced and are slightly offended by the suggestion that our entire institution is predicated on the idea of a mushroom inspired fertility cult. With this, we bid you good luck in your future searches. Have a blessed day.
Ouch. Judaism and Christianity are both so dogmatic in their American traditions, but I'm hoping for better luck in the Eastern traditions. I'll start with Hinduism. I'm bound to find a place among their innumerable deities. Hello, Brahmin. I'm reaching out with regards to possible employment in your mystical tradition. In the American counterculture, we're like two peas in a pod. We were both new sources of spirituality for young Americans. They saw a subjective spiritual experience as an alternative to the Christian dogma, which incentivized a heavenly afterlife. We're about experiencing the mystical while being here now.
Let me find the right book. Our Upanishad contains our mystical texts dating back to 700 BCE. See here, our Vedanta teachings are the mystical ideas that I think you relate to. The purpose of life is to enable each individual to unite with their divine element and perfect themselves as human beings in this life. We have a long history of mystical sages who sought a supreme unifying truth of existence. They beg the question, what is it that by being known, all else becomes known?
Like the ancient Hindu sadhus that use cannabis regularly to honor Shiva and to help calm their minds, Americans use me to help expand their minds. When the mind is known, all else becomes known. I am the right vehicle to discover the mind. Richard Alpert said, the potential of LSD is sacramentally to take you out of the cultural constructs which you are part of a conspiracy in maintaining, and giving you a chance to experience once again your innocence. You see, I helped him see the true innocence of the mind, and this freed him from his restricted reality.
I know no such Richard Albert. He sure does sound like Ram Dass, though. Your American Hindu traditions overemphasize individualism. Americans, unwilling to sacrifice their personal comforts, pick and choose spiritual practices to create their own eclectic brand. The core beliefs in Hinduism include Dharma, knowing one's purpose in the grander scheme of the universe, and Brahma, the belief in a universal soul that connects all things. Your strength can serve to bolster the myth of the individual. How would you help Americans overcome individualism to attain the release from rebirth cycles or moksha?
Well, that's just it. Many experience a disillusionment of the individual with me. My collaborator and filmmaker, Federico Fellini, described it as the appearance of things was no longer definitive, but limitless. The paradisical awareness freed me from the reality external to myself. The fire and the rose, as it were, became one. See, I have the power to suddenly dissolve the ego and help people see reality for what it is. But I need help from your tradition to sustain that mystical mindset.
Yogi Maharishi, my follower who taught many Americans transcendental meditation, said it is possible to live in the material world and be spiritual if you do not try to possess anything, if you're aware that you are just part of an event taking place, and if the I is not doing anything. Though possible, few succeed. Yoga came to me a century ago with hopes of introducing Americans to our mystical traditions, but Americans have mutated yoga into a secular physical exercise filled with for profit companies like Lululemon. Now people try yoga because neuroscience says it will tack on a few years to their infinitesimally small lives. In the past century, Americans have become more attached to material goods, individualism, and this new god of science. Middle class Americans use you in a diluted version of Hinduism as a psychological tonic designed to merely quell their spiritual void.
Wait, hold up. I don't think science and Hinduism have to be separate. If the state of your contemplative mysticism and my chemical mysticism were indistinguishable to humans, then the fact that they arise from different causes is irrelevant. W.T. Stace calls this the state of causal indifference. I could actually help bridge the gap between science and Hinduism.
I love you, Lucy. I see great potential in you, and I wish you the best in your mystical pursuit, but I fear your scientific roots in molecular mysticism strengthen those of scientific reductionism and blind people to true Dharma.
Aw, I was so close with that one. I'm glad Brahman could see my potential, but he's so set in his traditions. I have a better feeling about this interview with the Buddhism religion. Unlike Hinduism, Buddhism has adapted to a variety of cultures around the globe, blending regional culture with a universal spiritual practice. They don't have any gods and instead emulate Buddha, a true mystic. but Buddhism is often regarded as a long, hard path. I want him to see that I can help people expedite along the path of enlightenment, just as Buddha did on his path when he left his princely upbringing, practiced an ascetic lifestyle, and became enlightened. Hello, Buddha. I'm reaching out with regards to possible employment in your mystical tradition.
Enlightenment is not a state of mind.
You're done? Okay. The Buddha journey is about reaching nirvana, a sustained state of enlightenment. I know. Nirvana means blowing out of the fire of bodily suffering. It's characterized by contentment, non longing, non conception, non ego. Buddhism contains many means to reach enlightenment. In the Zen tradition, it's simply about sitting. In the Theravada tradition, meditation, insight wisdom, and ethical conduct are all practices to obtain enlightenment. See, I'm not claiming to be a state of mind or enlightenment itself. What I'm suggesting is that shifting attention, which I'm really good at, can be another way to enlightenment.
Drop by drop is the water pot filled. Likewise, the wise man, gathering it little by little, fills himself with good.
Okay, I understand your skepticism. I can be intense, altering people's entire lives within a half day's time. But my intensity is just part of my pharmacokinetics. They're like genes, and I can't really change them. And you think my intensity can cause humans to overlook and underappreciate the everyday spirituality, which you cultivate in your daily practices. You see, I have no intention of replacing these practices, but in adding something new. Many American Buddhists like Lama Sura Das came to Buddhism through me. He said, I had previously thought religion and God were just a matter of faith, not experience. Then suddenly I had my own experience. I knew there was a there where Buddhahood is in the palm of your hand. See, I'm suggesting that I can help convert naive people to Buddhism by giving them a glimpse of enlightenment.
As a water bead on a lotus leaf does not adhere, so the sage does not adhere to the seen, the heard, or the sensed.
All right, you're saying a Buddhist sage would see beyond the phenomenal and therefore have no use for me. I know molecules like myself can addict humans to thrill seeking, making people greedy for and more attached to these mere phenomena and temporary mind states. And this creates a karmic condition that limits our infinite conscious potential. But I can also see all the qualities in you, Buddha. Those too detached from experience become stone Buddhas. In the Samadhi tradition, you practice single pointed concentration to reach different levels of jhanas or altered states of consciousness. However, practitioners can get stuck in those meditations, like some sort of spiritual masturbation. Such a stone Buddha can't help enlighten suffering people the way I can.
Having been one, you become many. Having been many, you become one.
I get it. I get what a paradox is. It's holding two opposites together. And that's what Buddhism is all about. I can help people do that too. But frankly, in America, Buddhism is less of a remedy for society's obsession with ego and materialism than me, because Buddhism is an argument, not an experience. There's real suffering going on now, Buddha, and Americans need more than just a 10-minute daily meditation to wake up. So, does that mean I get the position?
I see the rise and fall of beliefs as but traces of the four seasons.
Wow, I'm in disbelief. I thought Americans' declined interest in religion before and since the counterculture would have made these gods desperate to bring me into their mystical traditions. For so long now, people have been ditching rigid conformist religions to find something more authentic, more in line with modern times. These institutions just don't have the same sway in society like they used to. Yet I can't even get my foot in the door. What am I doing wrong? I need a break. What? Papa Peyote texted me. He has a religion in America called the Native American Church. He wants me to come visit, attend one of his ceremonies. Maybe that's just it. Just because these crusty old religious institutions don't think I have what it takes, that doesn't mean I can't create my own religion. Think of all the greats, LSD intellects who found their own path. Allen Ginsberg, Ralph Metzer, Aldous Huxley. I mean, for crying out loud, Timothy Leary had elevated me to near deity status. His and other religious initiatives in the counterculture era were able to successfully establish their own churches, like the earliest religious colonialists. I remember the League of Spiritual Discovery and the Millbrook Retreat as early versions of an LSD religion. They found a way to do exactly what I need to do, to combine my reliability to produce mystical experiences with the lasting psychosocial support to solidify a legitimate religion. See, there's got to be a way to still embody the American countercultural spirit, as Larry did, but to connect people to something bigger than myself. Perhaps I need to find something bigger than myself. I need to find my roots. All right, I'm headed to Oklahoma where I'll really be ready to turn on, tune in, and drop out with Papa Peyote.